The yellow school bus rumbled down Maple Street as September rain streaked the windows. 16-year-old Sarah Chen pressed her face against the cool glass, watching the unfamiliar neighborhoods of Millbrook pass by. Her father's job transfer had brought their family from bustling Chicago to this small Connecticut town, and today would be her first day at Millbrook High. Sarah clutched her worn copy of the Breakfast Club soundtrack, the cassette tape, a comforting reminder of home. Her black hair was styled in the popular feathered look of 1987, and she wore a oversized purple sweater over acid-washed jeans and outfit. She'd spent an hour perfecting that morning. As the bus pulled up to the red brick school building, Sarah took a deep breath. Students poured out of various vehicles, their voices mixing with the sound of lockers slamming and sneakers squeaking on linoleum floors. She noticed the groups immediately, the popular kids with their perfectly styled hair and designer clothes, the athletes in their Letterman jackets, and the quieter students who seemed to blend into the background. In the main office, Mrs. Henderson, a kindly woman with wire-rimmed glasses, handed Sarah her schedule. "Welcome to Millbrook High, dear. You'll be in Mr. Peterson's home room. He's wonderful, with new students. Don't worry, you'll settle in just fine." Sarah nodded, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. The hallways seemed endless, filled with inside jokes and established friendships that had been years in the making. She found room 204 and hesitated at the doorway, watching students chat animatedly about their summer vacations and weekend plans. Mr. Peterson, a tall man with a graying beard, noticed her immediately. "You must be Sarah Chen, class. We have a new student joining us from Chicago." All eyes turned to her, and Sarah felt her cheeks flush. "Please, take the seat in the third row." As she walked toward the assigned desk, Sarah noticed the boy sitting behind her. He had sandy brown hair that fell slightly over his eyes and wore a faded denim jacket over a white t-shirt. When she sat down, he leaned forward slightly. "I'm Michael," he whispered, his voice warm and friendly. "Michael Rodriguez. Welcome to Millbrook." Sarah turned slightly, offering a small smile. "Sarah, thanks." There was something about his easy smile and genuine warmth that made her stomach flutter in a way she'd never experienced before. As Mr. Peterson began the morning announcements, Sarah found herself more aware of Michael's presence behind her than anything else in the room. Chapter 2. First Impressions. The first week at Millbrook High passed in a blur of new faces, confusing hallways, and the constant anxiety of being the outsider. Sarah quickly learned the social hierarchy. Jessica Martinez ruled the popular crowd with her perfectly crimped hair and collection of neon clothing, while her boyfriend, Brad Thompson, dominated the football team, both on and off the field. Sarah found herself gravitating toward the quieter student kids, like Amy Walsh, who wore vintage band t-shirts and had an encyclopedic knowledge of new wave music, and David Kim, who could solve any math problem but barely spoke above a whisper. But it was Michael who occupied most of her thoughts. In their shared classes, English, history, and chemistry, he always seemed to appear at just the right moment. When she struggled to find the library, he offered to walk her there. When she dropped her books in the hallway, he was there too, help her pick them up. When she sat alone at lunch, he and his friends invited her to join their table. Michael's friend group was an eclectic mix that seemed to transcend the usual high school boundaries. There was Tommy Chen, no relation to Sarah, despite the shared surname, an aspiring musician who carried his guitar everywhere and dreamed of forming a band like Duran Duran. Lisa Park was the editor of the school newspaper and had strong opinions about everything from Reagan's policies to the superiority of John Hughes movies. And quiet Roberto Santos, who was surprisingly funny once you got to know him, spent his free time reading science fiction novels and building model rockets. "So what's Chicago like?" Lisa asked during lunch on Friday, genuinely curious. "I've always wanted to visit a real city." Sarah smiled, twirling spaghetti around her fork. It's amazing, but overwhelming. The buildings are so tall, you can't see the sky sometimes. And the pizza, ... double quotes, she sighed dramatically. Nothing here compares to deep dish. We'll have to take you to Tony's Pizza downtown, Michael said, his eyes lighting up. It's not Chicago, but it's the best in Millbrook. Maybe this weekend. The casual invitation sent a warm flutter through Sarah's chest. She nodded, perhaps too eagerly. I'd love that. As the week progressed, Sarah began to notice little things about Michael that made her heart race. The way he absent-mindedly tapped his pencil during tests, creating a gentle rhythm that somehow calmed her nerves. How he always held doors open for people, not just girls, but anyone who happened to be behind him. The way his eyes crinkled when he laughed at Tommy's terrible jokes. In chemistry class, they were assigned as lab partners for the semester, as they worked together mixing solutions and recording observations. Sarah found herself stealing glances at Michael's concentrated expression. Once, when he looked up unexpectedly, their eyes met for a moment longer than necessary, and Sarah felt her cheeks burn. You okay? Michael asked, concerned. You look flushed. These chemicals aren't bothering you, are they? If only he knew. Sarah thought that the chemistry she was feeling had nothing to do with the periodic table. Chapter 3, Growing Closer. October arrived with a burst of brilliant foliage that transformed Millbrook into a picture-perfect New England town. Sarah had been at the school for a month now, and the initial awkwardness was beginning to fade. She'd found her rhythm in classes, made genuine friends, and started to feel like maybe, just maybe, she belonged here. The pizza outing with Michael had been everything she'd hoped for, and more. They'd talked for hours about everything and nothing. Their favorite movies, they both loved The Princess Bride. Their dreams for the future. Michael wanted to be a veterinarian. Sarah was torn between journalism and teaching, and their families both were dealing with the pressures of being children of immigrants who'd sacrificed everything for their kids' opportunities. My parents came here from Mexico when I was 5, Michael had shared, absently drawing patterns in the condensation on his Coke glass. They worked 2 jobs each just to make sure I could focus on school. Sometimes I feel like I'm carrying all their dreams on my shoulders. Sarah had understood completely. Her parents had left Taiwan with nothing but determination and her father's engineering degree. The move to Millbrook was supposed to be a step up, but Sarah knew her mother was lonely, struggling with English in a town where she was one of the few Asian faces. Now, as they walked through the halls together between classes, Sarah felt a comfortable easiness with Michael that she'd never experienced with anyone else. He had a way of making her feel seen and heard, as if her thoughts and opinions truly mattered to him. The annual fall festival was approaching, and the entire school buzzed with excitement. It was Millbrook's biggest event, a combination dance, carnival, and fundraiser that the whole town attended. Sarah had never been to anything like it, and she found herself both excited and terrified. You have to come, Amy insisted, as they sat in the library during study hall. It's actually fun, I promise. Even I go, and you know how I feel about school events. Sarah glanced over at Michael, who was supposedly studying for their upcoming history test but seemed more interested in their conversation. I don't know. I don't really have anything to wear to a school dance. We'll figure something out, Amy said firmly. Besides, I heard a certain someone was hoping you'd be there. Sarah's heart skipped as Amy nodded meaningfully toward Michael's table. When Sarah looked over, she caught Michael quickly looking away, but not before she saw the slight blush coloring his cheeks. That afternoon, in chemistry class, they worked in comfortable silence on their lab report about chemical reactions. Sarah couldn't help but think about the irony. Here she was, studying molecular bonds while feeling an entirely different kind of chemistry with her lab partner, Sarah. Michael's voice broke through her reverie. Are you planning to go to the fall festival? She looked up from her notebook, meeting his earnest brown eyes. I think so. Are you? Yeah, definitely. I was wondering, ... double quotes. He paused, seeming to gather courage. Would you maybe want to go together? I mean, as friends, he added quickly, though something in his expression suggested he might want it to be more than that. Sarah felt her heart racing. I'd like that, she said softly. Michael's smile was radiant. Great. It's going to be fun. They have this amazing local band that plays, and the whole town decorates Main Street. It's pretty magical, actually. As they packed up their materials, at the end of class, Sarah couldn't stop smiling. She was going to her first school dance, and she was going with the boy who had somehow become the center of her world in just a few short weeks. Chapter 4. The Fall Festival. The night of the Fall Festival arrived with a crisp October chill that made the stars seem brighter and the colored leaves more vibrant. Sarah stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting her dress for the 10th time. Amy had taken her shopping at the mall, and together they'd found the perfect outfit, a deep emerald dress with a flowy skirt and lace sleeves that made Sarah feel both elegant and comfortable. Her mother appeared in the doorway, holding a small jewelry box. You look beautiful, sweetheart, she said in her accented English, opening the box to reveal a delicate jade pendant. This was my mother's. I want you to have it for tonight. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as her mother fastened the necklace around her neck. The pendant was beautiful, but more than that, it felt like a blessing, a bridge between her heritage and this new chapter of her life. When the doorbell rang, Sarah's father answered it with the stern expression he reserved for any boy who showed interest in his daughter. Michael stood on the porch in a navy suit and tie, holding a small corsage, looking nervous but determined. Good evening, Mr. Chen, Michael said respectfully. I'm Michael Rodriguez. I'm here to escort Sarah to the school dance. Sarah's father studied him for a long moment before his expression softened slightly. You'll have her home by 11. Yes, sir. Absolutely. As they walked to Michael's car, a reliable, if not particularly stylish, Honda Civic, Sarah felt like she was floating. Michael opened the passenger door for her, and as she settled into the seat, he handed her the corsage. I wasn't sure what flowers you liked, he said, suddenly shy. But these reminded me of you. The corsage was made of small white roses with tiny blue forget-me-nots. It was simple, but perfect, and Sarah felt her heart swell as Michael gently helped her pin it to her dress. The school gymnasium had been transformed into an autumn wonderland. Orange and gold streamers hung from the ceiling, pumpkins and hay bales decorated the corners, and strings of white lights created a magical atmosphere. A local band called Midnight Express was setting up on the stage, their keyboard player testing out a synthesizer that promised an evening of classic 80s hits. Sarah and Michael found their friends clustered around one of the decorated tables. Amy looked stunning in a vintage black dress, while Lisa had gone all out with a bright pink creation that perfectly matched her personality. Tommy had somehow convinced his parents to let him wear his leather jacket with his dress shirt, and Roberto looked surprisingly sophisticated in a borrowed tuxedo. You two look amazing, Lisa gushed, and Sarah noticed how her friend's eyes lingered on the way Michael's hand rested gently on Sarah's back. As the evening progressed, Sarah found herself swept up in the magic of her first school dance. They danced to Don't Stop Believing by Journey, with the entire group singing along at the top of their lungs. During a slower song, Heaven is a Place on Earth by Belinda Carlisle, Michael asked her to dance, and Sarah felt like she was exactly where she belonged as they swayed together under the twinkling lights. I'm really glad you moved to Millbrook, Michael said softly, his voice barely audible over the music. Sarah looked up at him, seeing something in his eyes that made her breath catch. I'm glad I did too, she whispered. As the song ended, they stood there for a moment, neither wanting to break the spell. Around them, other couples continued dancing, but Sarah felt like she and Michael were in their own private world. Later, as Michael drove her home through the quiet streets of Millbrook, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed in just 2 months. She'd gone from being the scared new girl to someone who felt like she truly belonged somewhere for the first time in her life. "Thank you," she said, as they pulled into her driveway. Tonight was perfect. Michael walked her to the door, and for a moment, Sarah thought he might kiss her. Instead, he gently squeezed her hand and said, "Sweet dreams, Sarah." As she watched him drive away, Sarah touched the jade pendant at her throat and smiled. She had a feeling that this was just the beginning of something wonderful. Chapter 5. First kiss in complications. November brought an early frost to Millbrook, and with it, a subtle shift in the dynamic between Sarah and Michael. Their friendship had deepened into something more tender and uncertain, filled with lingering glances and accidental touches that sent electricity through both of them. It was during a study session at the town library that everything changed. They had been working on their chemistry project about ionic bonds when Michael looked up from his textbook and found Sarah watching him with an expression that made his heart race. "Sarah," he said softly, setting down his pencil, "I need to tell you something." The library was nearly empty, except for Mrs. Hartwell, the elderly librarian, who was busy cataloging books at the front desk. Sarah felt her pulse quicken as Michael moved his chair closer to hers. "I've been thinking about this for weeks," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Ever since the fall festival, I can't stop thinking about you. I mean, I thought about you before, but now." He ran a hand through his hair nervously. "I think I'm falling in love with you." Sarah's breath caught. The words she'd been hoping to hear, but had been too afraid to acknowledge, hung in the air between them. "Michael, you don't have to say anything," he said quickly. "I just needed you to know." But Sarah couldn't let the moment pass. "I think I'm falling in love with you too," she whispered. The kiss that followed was soft and tentative, a gentle exploration that tasted of mint gum and possibility. When they pulled apart, both were smiling, and Sarah felt like the world had shifted on its axis. However, their newfound happiness was about to face its first real challenge. The next day at school, Sarah noticed the whispers and stares as she walked down the hallway. By lunchtime, it was clear that word of their relationship had spread throughout the school, and not everyone was pleased. "I heard the new girl is dating Michael Rodriguez," Sarah overheard Jessica Martinez say loudly enough for her to hear. "How exotic. I wonder what his parents think about him bringing home a Chinese girl." The comment stung, made worse by the fact that Sarah had corrected people about her Taiwanese heritage countless times. She sat at their usual lunch table, trying to hide her hurt, but Michael immediately noticed her distress. "What's wrong?" he asked, sliding into the seat beside her. Before Sarah could answer, Brad Thompson approached their table with his usual swagger. "Hey, Rodriguez, heard you got yourself an Asian girlfriend. Your parents cool with that?" Michael's jaw tightened. "Her name is Sarah, and yes, my parents like her very much. They're actually intelligent enough to judge people by their character, not their ethnicity." "Easy there, hotshot," Brad said with a laugh. "Just wondering if you've thought about what kids would look like, mixed race and all that." Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger. Amy immediately stood up, her face flushed with indignation. "That's disgusting, Brad. Why don't you crawl back to whatever rock you came from?" The confrontation drew attention from other tables, and Sarah felt like every eye in the cafeteria was on her. She stood up abruptly, grabbing her backpack. "I need some air," she mumbled, rushing toward the exit. Michael caught up with her in the hallway. "Sarah, wait. Don't let them get to you." "It's not just them," Sarah said, tears threatening to spill. "It's everyone. The stares, the whispers. I knew people would talk, but I didn't realize how much it would hurt." Michael took her hands gently. "I'm sorry you have to deal with this. But Sarah, I don't care what anyone else thinks. I care about you, and I think what we have is worth fighting for." Looking into his earnest brown eyes, Sarah felt her resolve strengthen. "You're right. I'm not going to let ignorant people ruin this for us." Chapter 6. Meeting the parents. The first snow of the season fell on a Saturday in late November, blanketing Millbrook in pristine white. Sarah stood at her bedroom window, watching the flakes drift past, when her mother appeared in the doorway. "Sarah, your father and I would like to meet this boy you've been spending so much time with," her mother said in Mandarin, her tone gentle but firm. "Perhaps you could invite him for dinner this weekend." Sarah's stomach clenched with anxiety. She'd been dreading this moment, knowing that her parents, despite their love for her, carried traditional expectations about dating and relationships. The idea of Michael sitting at their dinner table, trying to navigate her father's protective instincts and her mother's polite but thorough questioning, made her nervous. "I'll ask him," Sarah replied, also in Mandarin. "But please, try to be ... welcoming." Her mother's expression softened. "We just want to know the boy who has made our daughter so happy." "You smile more now, Saubal. We've noticed." That afternoon, Sarah called Michael from the phone in her kitchen, twisting the curly cord around her finger as she explained the dinner invitation. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I'd love to meet your parents," Michael said. "Finally. I'll be honest, I'm terrified, but I want to do this right. What should I know? Any topics I should avoid?" Sarah smiled at his earnestness. "Just be yourself. And maybe don't mention that you want to be a veterinarian until after we've eaten. My mom has strong feelings about pets in the house." Sunday evening arrived with another light snowfall. Michael stood on the Chen family's front porch, holding a small bouquet of flowers for Sarah's mother and a bottle of sparkling cider. Dressed in his best slacks and a button-down shirt his mother had ironed twice, Sarah's father answered the door, his expression neutral but assessing. "Mr. Rodriguez, I presume?" "Yes, sir. Thank you for inviting me to your home." Michael's voice was steady despite his nerves. The dinner was initially awkward, with polite conversation about school and the weather. But as the evening progressed, Sarah watched with growing amazement as Michael gradually won over her parents. He asked thoughtful questions about her father's engineering work, complimented her mother's cooking with genuine enthusiasm, and when her father mentioned missing certain foods from Taiwan, Michael shared stories of his own family's struggles to find authentic Mexican ingredients in small-town Connecticut. "My grandmother makes the best tamales," Michael said, his eyes lighting up. "She'd love to meet you both. Maybe we could arrange a dinner exchange sometime." Sarah's mother smiled, the first genuine smile Sarah had seen from her all evening. "That sounds wonderful. I would like to learn about Mexican cooking." After dinner, as Sarah walked Michael to the door, she could hardly contain her relief and joy. "That went better than I ever imagined," she whispered. "Your parents are great," Michael said, pulling on his coat. "I can see where you get your strength and kindness from." A week later, Sarah found herself standing in the Rodriguez family's kitchen, equally nervous about meeting Michael's parents. The house was warm and welcoming, filled with the aroma of spices and the sound of Spanish conversation from the living room. "Mia, you must be Sarah," said Mrs. Rodriguez, a petite woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Miguel has told us so much about you. Welcome to our home." Michael's father, a tall man with calloused hands and a warm smile, stood up from the kitchen table where he'd been reading the newspaper. "Sarah, it's wonderful to finally meet you. Our son speaks of you constantly." The evening was filled with laughter, stories, and the most delicious food Sarah had ever tasted. Michael's younger sister, Carmen, a precocious 14-year-old, regaled Sarah with embarrassing stories about Michael's childhood, while his parents shared their own journey from Mexico to Connecticut. "We came here with nothing but hope," Mr. Rodriguez said, his voice filled with pride. "We wanted our children to have opportunities we never had. Miguel is the first in our family to graduate from high school, and next year, He'll be the first to go to college. Sarah felt the weight of that expectation, understanding it deeply from her own family's experience. She also felt honored to be trusted with such personal family history. As the evening wound down, Mrs. Rodriguez pulled Sarah aside. "I can see that you make our Miguel very happy," she said softly. "And I can see why. You have a good heart, Mia." Walking home that night, Sarah felt a profound sense of belonging, not just to Millbrook, but to something bigger, chosen family that transcended cultural boundaries and embraced love in all its forms. Chapter 7. Winter Formal Preparations. December arrived with a bitter cold snap that froze the pond in the town center solid enough for skating. The entire school buzzed with excitement about the upcoming winter formal, Millbrook High's most elegant event of the year. Unlike the casual fall festival, this was a formal affair that required evening gowns, tuxedos, and the kind of preparation that sent teenage girls into a frenzy of planning. Sarah found herself caught up in the excitement, despite her initial reservations. She'd never been to a formal dance before, and the prospect of finding the perfect dress felt both thrilling and overwhelming. Amy had volunteered to help with the shopping expedition, and together they'd planned a full day at the mall in Hartford. "It has to be perfect," Amy said as they browsed through the dress section at Macy's. "This is your first formal dance, and you're going with the sweetest guy in school. We need to find something that makes Michael forget how to speak." Sarah laughed, pulling out a deep blue dress with silver beading. "I think you're being a little dramatic. Trust me, I've seen the way he looks at you in chemistry class. The boy is smitten." Amy held up a burgundy velvet dress. "What about this one?" After trying on what felt like dozens of dresses, Sarah finally found the one. It was a midnight blue gown with delicate beading around the neckline and a flowing skirt that made her feel like a princess. When she stepped out of the dressing room, Amy's gasp told her everything she needed to know. "That's it," Amy said, definitively. "That's the dress." Meanwhile, Michael was dealing with his own formal preparation challenges. His family didn't have much money for extras, and the cost of renting a tuxedo was stretching their budget. When his mother found him looking through the rental brochures with a worried expression, she sat down beside him at the kitchen table. "What's troubling you?" she asked gently. "The tuxedo rental costs more than I thought," Michael admitted. "I don't want to ask you and Dad for money when I know things are tight." His mother smiled and disappeared into her bedroom, returning with a small envelope. "Your father and I have been saving for something special for you. We wanted to surprise you for graduation, but perhaps now is the right time." Inside the envelope was enough money for the tuxedo rental and a corsage for Sarah. Michael's eyes filled with tears as he hugged his mother. "Thank you, Mommy. I promise I'll make you proud." "You already do, every day," she said, smoothing his hair. "Now, let's make sure you look handsome for your Sarah." As the date of the formal approached, Sarah found herself nervous in a way she hadn't been since her first day at Millbrook. This felt like a milestone, a moment that would somehow define her high school experience. She spent extra time on her appearance, carefully styling her hair and applying makeup with the skill Amy had taught her. The night of the dance, both families gathered in the Chun's living room for photos. Sarah's mother had prepared a special dinner for both families, creating an atmosphere of celebration and joy. Michael looked incredibly handsome in his black tuxedo, his hair neatly styled, and when he saw Sarah in her midnight blue gown, his expression of pure admiration made all the preparation worthwhile. "You look absolutely beautiful," he whispered as he helped her with her coat. "You don't look so bad yourself," Sarah replied, adjusting his tie with a smile. The winter formal was held at the Millbrook Country Club, an elegant venue with crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the snow-covered golf course. The gymnasium decorations of the fall festival had been replaced with sophisticated silver and white decor that transformed the space into a winter wonderland. As they entered the ballroom, Sarah felt like she was stepping into a fairy tale. The band was playing soft jazz. Couples were swaying on the dance floor, and the atmosphere was magical in a way that made her believe anything was possible. "May I have this dance?" Michael asked, offering his arm with exaggerated formality. As they danced to the gentle music, Sarah felt a profound sense of happiness. She was exactly where she wanted to be, with exactly the person she wanted to be with. The boy who had sat behind her in homeroom had become so much more than she ever could have imagined. Chapter 8. The First Fight. January brought a harsh winter storm that kept Millbrook buried under 3 feet of snow for a week. School was cancelled, and Sarah found herself with an unexpected abundance of time to think, perhaps too much time. As she sat in her room, watching the snow fall outside her window, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing between her and Michael. It started with small things. During their phone conversations, there were awkward pauses where there used to be easy laughter. When they finally returned to school, Michael seemed distracted, less attentive than usual. Sarah tried to convince herself she was imagining things, but the evidence was hard to ignore. The breaking point came during lunch on a particularly cold Friday. Sarah had been looking forward to spending the weekend with Michael, perhaps ice skating at the pond or watching movies at his house. But when she brought up their plans, Michael's response was distant. "Actually, I promised Tommy I'd help him with his guitar practice this weekend," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "We're trying to put together a band for the talent show." Sarah felt a stab of hurt. "Since when are you interested in being in a band? You've never mentioned it before." "It's just something fun to do with friends," Michael replied, his tone slightly defensive. "I didn't realize I needed to clear all my activities with you first." The comment stung, and Sarah felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment and anger. "That's not what I meant, and you know it. It's just that we used to talk about everything, and now I feel like you're keeping things from me." "I'm not keeping anything from you," Michael said, but his voice lacked conviction. The conversation might have escalated further, but Amy chose that moment to join them at the table, immediately sensing the tension. "Everything okay here?" she asked carefully. "Fine," Sarah said curtly, gathering her things. "I think I'll eat in the library today." As she walked away, Sarah heard Michael call her name, but she didn't turn around. She spent the rest of lunch in the library, trying to focus on her homework, but finding herself replaying the conversation over and over. The weekend passed slowly, with Sarah expecting Michael to call and apologize, but the phone remained silent. By Monday morning, she was hurt and confused, unsure of what she'd done wrong or how to fix things. In chemistry class, they worked on their lab assignment in uncomfortable silence. The easy partnership they'd developed over the months had been replaced by stilted politeness and careful avoidance of eye contact. Sarah found herself watching Michael's hands as he measured out chemicals, remembering how those same hands had held her so gently at the winter formal just weeks before. "Sarah," Michael said quietly, breaking the silence, "about Friday, ... "It's fine," Sarah replied, not looking up from her notebook. "You don't owe me an explanation." "But I do," he insisted. "I was ... I was being stupid. The truth is, I've been feeling overwhelmed lately. With school, with college applications, with everything. And sometimes I feel like I'm not good enough for you." Sarah finally looked up, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. "What do you mean?" Michael set down his beaker and turned to face her fully. "You're so smart, so talented, so ... perfect. You could have any guy in this school. Sometimes I wonder why you're with me." "Michael, that's ridiculous," Sarah said, her anger melting into concern. "You're the one who's perfect? You're kind, funny, caring. You're everything I never knew I wanted." "Really?" he asked, his eyes searching her face. "Really," she confirmed, reaching across the table to take his hand. "But you can't shut me out when you're feeling insecure. We're supposed to be a team, remember? Michael squeezed her hand gently. I'm sorry, I was being an idiot. Can you forgive me? Sarah smiled, feeling the tension that had been building for days finally dissipate. Only if you promise to talk to me next time, instead of pulling away. I promise, he said, bringing her hand to his lips for a gentle kiss. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat loudly from the front of the classroom, reminding them they were supposed to be focusing on their experiment. But as Sarah and Michael returned to their work, both were smiling. They'd weathered their first real fight, and somehow, their relationship felt stronger for it. That afternoon, as they walked to Sarah's locker together, Michael brought up the talent show again. You know, Tommy really is trying to put together a band. They could use a singer. Are you interested? Sarah raised an eyebrow. Are you asking me to join your band, Michael Rodriguez? Maybe, he said with a grin. I mean, if you're brave enough to get on stage and sing in front of the whole school. Sarah considered it for a moment. 6 months ago, she would have been terrified at the prospect, but now, with Michael by her side and a group of friends who had become like family, she felt ready to take on any challenge. Count me in, she said, and Michael's smile was brighter than the winter sun streaming through the hallway windows. Chapter 9. The talent show February arrived with the promise of spring still weeks away, but the energy in Millbrook High was electric with anticipation for the annual talent show. What had started as a casual conversation between Tommy and Michael had evolved into something much more serious. A genuine attempt to create something beautiful together. The band had been meeting every day after school in Tommy's garage, which his parents had reluctantly allowed them to convert into a makeshift rehearsal space. The group had grown to include Lisa on keyboards, a skill she'd been hiding for years, Roberto on bass guitar borrowed from his older brother, and Michael on drums, an instrument he'd been teaching himself through library books and pure determination. Sarah's role as lead vocalist had initially terrified her, but as the weeks passed, she discovered a confidence she never knew she possessed. They'd chosen to perform Time After Time by Cyndi Lauper, a song that showcased Sarah's clear, sweet voice, while allowing each band member to contribute their own musical personality. From the top, Tommy called out during their Thursday rehearsal, adjusting his guitar strap. And Sarah, remember to project your voice during the chorus. The acoustics in the auditorium are going to be different from in here. Sarah nodded, gripping the microphone stand with slightly trembling hands. Despite weeks of practice, she still felt nervous before each run-through. But as the opening chords filled the garage, something magical happened, the same thing that had been happening more and more frequently during their rehearsals. The 5 friends became something greater than the sum of their parts, their individual talents weaving together into something genuinely beautiful. As Sarah sang the opening lines, she caught Michael's eye from behind the drum kit. He smiled at her, that warm, encouraging smile that had become her anchor, and she felt her nerves settle into focused energy. When they reached the chorus, Lisa's keyboard melody soared above the guitar and bass, while Michael's steady rhythm held everything together. That was amazing, Amy said from her spot on an overturned crate, where she'd been serving as their unofficial audience and critic. You guys are actually good. Like, really good. Don't sound so surprised, Roberto said with a grin, carefully setting his bass guitar in its stand. I'm not surprised, Amy protested. I'm just ... okay. Maybe I am a little surprised, but in a good way. The talent show was scheduled for the last Friday in February, and as the date approached, Sarah found herself dealing with a level of stage fright she hadn't expected. It was one thing to sing in Tommy's garage with her friends. It was another entirely to perform in front of the entire school, including teachers, parents, and most nerve-wracking of all, her classmates, who might still harbor negative feelings about her relationship with Michael. What if I forget the words? Sarah asked Michael as they walked to her locker after their final rehearsal. What if my voice cracks? What if people laugh? Michael stopped walking and turned to face her, gently taking her hands. Sarah, you've been practicing this song for weeks. You know every word, every note, every breath. And even if something goes wrong, so what? We're doing this together. I'll be right there with you. But what if no what ifs? Michael interrupted softly. Remember what you told me when I was being insecure. We're a team, all of us. And tomorrow night, we're going to show everyone what we can do together. The night of the talent show arrived, with a packed auditorium and an atmosphere of excitement that was almost overwhelming. Sarah stood in the wings with her friends, watching as act after act took the stage. There was a comedy routine by two senior boys, a dramatic monologue by Jessica Martinez who, to Sarah's surprise, was actually quite talented, and a dance performance by the cheerleading squad. We're next, Tommy announced, peering around the curtain. Everyone ready? Sarah felt her heart racing as they took their positions on stage. The auditorium lights were bright, making it difficult to see individual faces in the audience, but she could sense the energy of the crowd. As Tommy counted them in, Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself. Then the music began, and something extraordinary happened. All of Sarah's nervousness melted away, replaced by pure joy in the act of creating something beautiful with her friends. Her voice soared over the instruments, clear and strong and full of emotion. When she opened her eyes during the second verse, she could see people in the audience swaying along, genuinely moved by their performance. During the guitar solo, Sarah caught sight of her parents in the third row, her mother's face shining with pride, her father actually smiling. A few rows back, she spotted Michael's family, Mrs. Rodriguez holding a small bouquet of flowers. As they reached the final chorus, Sarah felt a rush of pure happiness. This was what belonging felt like, not just to a place, but to a moment, to a group of people who had become her chosen family. When the last note faded and the applause began, Sarah felt tears of joy streaming down her face. They won second place, losing only to a senior who performed a technically perfect piano concerto. But as they stood on stage, accepting their ribbon, Sarah realized that the prize didn't matter. What mattered was the journey they'd taken together, the friendships they'd strengthened, and the confidence she'd discovered within herself. Chapter 10. College plans and uncertainty. March brought the dreaded college acceptance letters, and with them, a new source of anxiety for Sarah and Michael. They'd both applied to various schools, but their top choices were different. Sarah hoped to attend Columbia University in New York City for journalism, while Michael had his heart set on Cornell's veterinary program. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened the envelope from Columbia, her parents hovering anxiously nearby. As she read the first line, her face broke into a smile of pure joy. "I got in," she whispered. Then louder, "I got in." Her parents embraced her, her mother crying with happiness while her father beamed with pride. But even in the midst of celebration, Sarah couldn't shake the worry about what this might mean for her relationship with Michael. Michael's letter from Cornell arrived 2 days later. Sarah waited anxiously by the phone, and when it finally rang, Michael's voice was subdued. "I didn't get in," he said quietly. "I got into state though, full scholarship." Sarah's heart ached for him. She knew how much Cornell had meant to him, how he'd dreamed of their veterinary program since freshman year. "Michael, I'm so sorry, but state has a good program too, right?" "Yeah," he said, but she could hear the disappointment in his voice. "It's just ... It's not what I planned." They met at their usual spot by the pond after school, the ice finally beginning to thaw with the promise of spring. Michael sat on their favorite bench, staring out at the water with a distant expression. "I'm happy for you," he said as Sarah sat beside him. "Columbia is perfect for you. You're going to be an amazing journalist." "Thank you," Sarah said softly. "But Michael, about us, ... I know," he said, turning to face her. New York and here, it's not exactly close. They sat in silence for a moment, both grappling with the reality of their situation. Sarah had always known that high school relationships rarely survived the transition to college, but she'd somehow convinced herself that theirs would be different. Maybe we should talk about taking a break, Michael said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I mean, you're going to meet so many new people, have so many new experiences. I don't want to hold you back. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. Is that what you want? No, Michael said immediately. God, no. But I want what's best for you, even if it's not what I want. What if what's best for me is you? Sarah asked, taking his hand. What if I don't want to do this without you? Michael squeezed her hand. Gently. Sarah, be realistic. Long-distance relationships in college, they don't work. We both know that. But what if we could make it work? Sarah insisted. What if we're worth fighting for? They talked for hours, going in circles, both afraid to make a decision that might ruin everything they'd built together. Finally, as the sun began to set, they agreed to table the discussion until they had more information about their options. Over the next few weeks, more letters arrived. Sarah received acceptances from several schools, including a few that were closer to home. Michael was accepted to 3 state schools, all offering generous financial aid packages. The uncertainty was affecting their relationship in ways neither had anticipated. Conversations that used to flow easily now felt forced, and they found themselves avoiding discussions about the future. Their friends noticed the change, but Sarah and Michael both insisted everything was fine. It was Lisa who finally confronted them during lunch on a particularly tense day. Okay, I can't take this anymore, she said, setting down her sandwich with determination. You two are miserable, and you're making the rest of us miserable too. What's going on? Sarah and Michael exchanged glances. They'd been so focused on their own dilemma that they hadn't realized how their uncertainty was affecting their friends. We're trying to figure out what happens next year, Sarah said finally. With college and everything, and you're both being idiots about it, Amy added bluntly. You're so worried about what might happen that you're ruining what you have right now. Tommy nodded in agreement. Look, I don't know what's going to happen next year either. None of us do. But I know that you two are happier together than apart. Maybe instead of planning for the worst, you should focus on making the most of the time you have. Their friend's words hit home. That evening, Sarah and Michael met at the pond again, this time with a different perspective. They're right, Sarah said, leaning against Michael's shoulder. We've been so afraid of losing each other that we've already started pulling away. I know, Michael agreed, wrapping his arm around her. I'm sorry, I just, ... I love you so much, and the thought of losing you terrifies me. You're not going to lose me, Sarah said firmly. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want to face it with you. Whether that's long distance, or finding schools closer together, or whatever, we'll figure it out. Michael kissed the top of her head. I love you, Sarah Chen. I love you too, Michael Rodriguez. As they sat together watching the last of the winter ice melt away, both felt a renewed sense of hope. They didn't have all the answers, but they had each other, and for now, that was enough. Chapter 11, Prom and Senior Year. Milestones. April blossomed into May with an explosion of color that made Millbrook look like a postcard. The final months of senior year brought a bittersweet quality to everything. Every lunch period, every class, every moment with friends felt precious, because everyone knew it was limited. Prom planning consumed the school with the same intensity as the previous year's winter formal, but with higher stakes. This was the last dance, the final celebration before graduation, scattered everyone to different colleges and different lives. Sarah and Michael had decided to go together, of course, but the approaching date felt weighted with significance. They'd managed to work through their college anxieties and had come to a decision that felt right for both of them. Sarah would attend Columbia as planned, while Michael had chosen to defer his enrollment for a year to save money and reapply to Cornell. They would try to make the long-distance relationship work, taking things one day at a time. "I can't believe we're actually seniors," Amy said as she and Sarah browsed through dress shops in Hartford. "It feels like yesterday that you were the scared new girl who didn't know where the library was." Sarah laughed, holding up a rose gown. "And now I'm the scared senior who doesn't know where she'll be living next year." "Hey," Amy said, grabbing Sarah's arm. "You're going to be fine. More than fine. You're going to conquer New York City." The dress shopping expedition was different this time, more emotional, more significant. Sarah's mother had insisted on coming along, and as Sarah tried on dress after dress, she could see her mother's eyes growing misty. "This one," Sarah said, stepping out of the dressing room in a deep emerald dress that complemented her skin tone perfectly. "This is the one." Her mother nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "You look beautiful, Salbal, so grown up." Meanwhile, Michael was dealing with his own prom preparations and the weight of senior year expectations. His parents had been supportive of his decision to defer college, understanding that the financial pressures on their family made it a practical choice. "I'm proud of you, mijo," his father said as they stood in the tuxedo rental shop. "Taking time to make sure you're ready, to make sure our family is stable. That's mature thinking." "I just hope I'm making the right choice," Michael replied, adjusting his bow tie in the mirror. "There's no such thing as the perfect choice," his father said wisely. "There's only the choice you make, and then you work to make it the right one." Prom night arrived with perfect weather and high emotions. The event was held at the historic Millbrook Inn, an elegant venue that had hosted generations of proms. Sarah felt like a princess in her emerald dress, her hair styled in an elegant updo that showcased her jade pendant, the same one her mother had given her for the fall festival. Michael looked handsome in his black tuxedo, his hair perfectly styled, and when he saw Sarah, his expression of pure adoration made her feel like the most beautiful girl in the world. "You take my breath away," he whispered as he helped her with her corsage. White roses with small emerald ribbons that matched her dress perfectly. The prom itself was magical in all the ways high school proms are supposed to be. They danced to More Than a Feeling by Boston, laughed during the group photos, and shared quiet moments together between the chaos of celebration. But the most memorable moment came during the slow dance to Every Rose Has Its Thorn by Poison. As they swayed together, Sarah felt overwhelmed by the realization that this chapter of their lives was ending. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly, her head resting against Michael's chest. "Me too," he replied, his arms tightening around her. "But Sarah, whatever happens, I want you to know that loving you has been the best part of high school. You've made me a better person. You saved me," Sarah said, looking up at him. "When I moved here, I was so lost. You helped me find myself." They kissed then, a gentle, sweet kiss that tasted of promises and possibilities. Around them, other couples continued dancing, but Sarah felt like she and Michael were in their own private world. Later, as the evening wound down and they prepared to leave, Sarah realized that this wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. They'd grown from the scared new girl and the kind boy who sat behind her into two people who were ready to face whatever came next. The after-prom party was held at Amy's house, with her parents graciously providing snacks and supervision for the group of friends who weren't ready for the night to end. They sat around the living room, still in their formal wear, talking and laughing about memories from the past 4 years. "Remember when Sarah first moved here and she got lost trying to find the gym?" Tommy said, strumming his guitar softly. "Remember when Michael tried to ask her to the fall festival and got so nervous he forgot how to speak?" Lisa added with a grin. Remember when they had their first fight and we all had to stage an intervention? Roberto chimed in as the stories continued. Sarah felt overwhelmed with gratitude for these people who had become her family. Moving to Millbrook had been the best thing that had ever happened to her. Not because of the town itself, but because of the relationships she'd formed. Here, I love you guys, she said, her voice thick with emotion. All of you. We love you too, Amy said. And suddenly they were all in a group hug, laughing and crying at the same time, as the night finally came to an end, and Michael walked Sarah to her door. They both knew that something was shifting. They were no longer just high school sweethearts. They were young adults who had chosen to build something meaningful together. See you tomorrow, Michael asked, as he had hundreds of times before. Always, Sarah replied, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. Chapter 12. Graduation and forever June arrived, with the promise of summer and the bittersweet reality of endings that were also beginnings. Graduation day dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect weather that made everything feel possible. Sarah woke early, her stomach fluttering with excitement and nerves. In just a few hours, she would walk across the stage at Millbrook High and officially close this chapter of her life. The girl who had arrived scared and uncertain in September 1987 was graduating as valedictorian, surrounded by friends who had become family, and in love with a boy who had become the center of her world. The morning was a whirlwind of preparation. Sarah's parents fussed over her cap and gown, taking dozens of photos and speaking in rapid Mandarin about how proud they were. Her mother had made a special breakfast of all Sarah's favorite foods, and her father had taken the day off work, something he rarely did. "We are so proud of you, Saubal," her mother said, tears in her eyes, as she adjusted Sarah's graduation cap. "You have exceeded all our dreams." At the school, the graduating class of 1988 gathered in the gymnasium for final preparations. Sarah found Michael in the crowd, handsome in his cap and gown, and they shared a moment of quiet connection amid the chaos. "Ready for this?" he asked, taking her hand. "As ready as I'll ever be," Sarah replied, squeezing his fingers. The ceremony was held on the football field, with families packed into the bleachers under a brilliant blue sky. Sarah's speech as valedictorian was about new beginnings and the courage to embrace change, themes that felt particularly relevant to her own journey. 4 years ago, many of us were strangers, she said, looking out at her classmates. We came from different backgrounds, different dreams, different fears, but we became a family here. We learned that our differences make us stronger, not weaker. We learned that love can transcend boundaries, that friendship can overcome obstacles, and that home isn't a place, it's the people who accept you exactly as you are. As she spoke, Sarah's eyes found Michael in the crowd of graduates, then her parents in the stands, then Amy and her other friends. Each face represented a piece of her heart, a part of the person she'd become. "So as we leave here today," she continued, "let's remember that endings are just new beginnings in disguise. Let's remember that the love we've shared here will connect us no matter where life takes us. And let's remember that we have the power to create the future we want to see." The applause was thunderous, but Sarah barely heard it. She was too busy taking in the moment, burning it into her memory forever. When they called her name, and she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, Sarah felt a profound sense of completion. She'd done it. She'd not only survived the transition to a new school, but she'd thrived. After the ceremony, there was the usual chaos of families taking photos and friends saying goodbye. Sarah found herself passed from one group to another, hugging classmates she might never see again, exchanging addresses and promises to stay in touch. But through it all, she kept finding her way back to Michael. They had their own celebration to plan, their own future to discuss. That evening, both families gathered at the Chen house for a combined graduation party. Sarah's mother had outdone herself with the food, while Michael's family had contributed traditional Mexican dishes that had become favorites with Sarah's parents. The cultural exchange that had begun with their children's relationship had blossomed into genuine friendship between the families. "I have something for you," Michael said, pulling Sarah aside as the party continued around them. He handed her a small wrapped box, his expression nervous and excited. Inside was a delicate silver locket, engraved with both their initials and the date of their first kiss. Inside the locket was a tiny photo of the two of them at the winter formal, both smiling radiantly. "Michael, it's beautiful," Sarah breathed, tears welling up in her eyes. "I wanted you to have something to remember us by," he said, fastening the locket around her neck. "No matter what happens, no matter where we go, I want you to know that these have been the best years of my life." Sarah kissed him then, pouring all her love and gratitude into the gesture. "I love you so much. This isn't goodbye, you know. This is just the beginning." "I know," Michael said, smiling. "I'm not going anywhere. We're going to make this work." As the party continued into the evening, Sarah found herself surrounded by all the people who had made her time in Millbrook so special. Amy was leaving for art school in Boston. Tommy had gotten into a music program in Nashville. Lisa was headed to journalism school in Washington, D.C., and Roberto was staying local to study engineering. "Promise me we'll stay in touch," Amy said, hugging Sarah tightly. "Promise me we won't let distance ruin what we have." "I promise," Sarah said, meaning it completely. Later, as the guests began to leave and the families started cleaning up, Sarah and Michael found themselves alone on the back porch, looking up at the stars. "So what happens now?" Michael asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Now we trust," Sarah said, leaning into him. "We trust that what we have is strong enough to survive whatever comes next. We trust that love finds a way, and if it gets hard, when it gets hard," Sarah corrected, "we remember tonight. We remember how we feel right now, how much we love each other, how much we've grown together, and we fight for it." Michael kissed the top of her head. "I can do that. Me too." As they sat together under the stars, Sarah reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. The scared 16-year-old who had walked into Millbrook High in September 1987 had become a confident young woman, ready to take on the world. She'd found love, friendship, and most importantly, herself. The boy who had sat behind her in homeroom had become so much more than her first love. He'd become her partner, her best friend, her home. And while the future was uncertain, Sarah knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. In the distance, the church bells of Millbrook chimed midnight, marking the official end of their high school years. But Sarah wasn't sad. She was grateful. Grateful for the journey, grateful for the love, and grateful for the promise of tomorrow. "Ready for the next adventure?" Michael asked, as if reading her thoughts. Sarah smiled, her hand finding the locket at her throat. "With you, always." And as the stars wheeled overhead and the summer breeze carried the scent of jasmine and possibility, Sarah knew that some love stories are just beginning when they seem to end. Theirs was one of them. The E&D epilogue. 5 years later, Sarah graduated from Columbia with highest honors and a job offer from the New York Times. Michael completed his veterinary degree at Cornell and opened a practice in a small town just an hour from New York City. They were married the following spring in a ceremony that brought together two families, two cultures, and countless friends who had watched their love story unfold. The boy who had sat behind her in homeroom had indeed become her forever love, proving that sometimes the best stories are the ones that begin with the simplest gesture of kindness.